You're gearing up for another year at the Board of Education since you're running incumbent. What can you bring that's different this time around?
First of all, I still have 40 years of educational experience. I've been a teacher, I've been a coach, I've been an administrator, and for the last 3 years I've been so humbled and privileged to serve the people of the 7th District in the State Board of Education. I think anytime a person has gained experience, it allows them to use that experience to improve their ability to make good decisions.
And so where do you stand on the proposed health education standards?
First of all, the health education standards are not proposed. They have been stopped. I was instrumental in that. I have always been opposed to the health education standards, and I will continue to oppose those if indeed they were brought forth.
And so I guess if elected again, what would you like to see done with these standards? Any changes?
Well, as I've made mention, there is no need for the state board to be bringing them up again, and we have made actions that have supported that. And I certainly oppose any action by the state board that would bring forth the state health standards as we saw them earlier, clear back in March.
And so what do you feel is age-appropriate health education standards if elected again?
That's always been a major issue of mine, is age appropriateness and the use of inappropriate language as well throughout the standards. If we learned nothing else, we found out that local control is where health standards should be. And when I say local control, obviously I'm talking about local school boards, local teachers, local administrators, but more important, the parents and patrons of that particular district.
And so what efforts would you take to protect students from materials that are not sexually appropriate?
Well, again, and this is going to be a common theme throughout our interview, that is a decision that needs to be made at the local level. What is true in Nebraska, because we are a local control school, tied to that is one size does not fit all. In other words, students, parents, school board members, teachers, administrators in Omaha will see things much different than they do, for example, in Scottsbluff or Gering or Chadron or Gothenburg or Cozad or any of those particular schools. So for me to make a decision based on the idea that this is the responsibility of the state board, that would be totally inappropriate. This must be a decision that's made at the local level.
Perfect. And I'll give you a break a little bit.
Okay.
We're going to make sure everything's still good. Okay, perfect.
All right.
Just getting started.
Good.
So as the debate over the proposed health education standards showed, many parents and communities felt the State Board of Education's not listening to their concerns. If elected again, how would you work to listen to those individuals?
Well, not to be argumentative, but if we made a mistake, and I should say we made a mistake in that we listened too much. We listened too long. We should have made this decision long before we eventually did. And so to say we didn't listen would be, in my opinion, very inappropriate. But to say that we did listen too long, that would be a criticism I would have of the state board and myself in particular, because that's who we're talking to and talking about. So listening is a skill that I believe I've always possessed, and I always think that it's very, very important that we listen to all sides of an issue before we make a final decision. Again, if I have a criticism of myself and the board, is that we listened too long and should have made a decision much earlier.
And how would you define critical race theory? In your opinion, is it being taught in Nebraska public schools?
I'll try to deal with a really basic definition. As I see it, it's the belief that culture or the country is ruled by a ruling class, in this instance generally white men, and that they are the oppressor and that people of color are the oppressed. To answer the question, I'd like to use a quote from a middle school teacher and that I think is very appropriate, and I've heard others use it now as well, and that is, history is based on fact. History is not based on theory. And so I think that speaks volumes when we talk about critical race theory. Do I believe that it's being taught in, I'm going to only talk about the 7th District because that's what I represent. I do not believe that it is being taught. And what I can base that on is talking to superintendents, talking to school boards, talking to teachers, and it would appear to me that if you go into any school in the 7th District and you ask their superintendent, you ask their history teacher, you ask their administration, whatever, they will tell you, no, CRT is not part of the curriculum. And to be honest with you, I just heard of CRT a little bit over a year ago, and now all of a sudden it's exploded onto the scene. I just don't see CRT as being an issue in the 7th District, an issue from the standpoint, is it being taught in schools? The answer, in my very humble and somewhat researched opinion, no.
And so, do you support banning certain books in school?
Again, you're getting into an area that I think has to be dealt with at the local level. For the state board to step up and say these books should be banned or these books should not be banned or whatever the case might be, I just don't see that as being our function. That's something that needs to be left again to local control. And again, we have to go back to the statement of what may be acceptable in Gothenburg may not be acceptable in Binkelman or maybe a school further east. So it's a local issue, and if we learn nothing else as a state board from our experiences, it's that we must listen to the people. And in this instance, it has to be working with the school board, working with the administration, working with the parents and patrons of the district to make that decision.
And so what sort of material do you think should be banned in schools?
Again, I believe my previous answer basically handles this question as well. For me or the local board, or the state board to make that decision would just be inappropriate. It has to be a local level decision, and it has to be based on the idea that, hey, one size does not fit all.
And what would be the proper channel for banning questionable books if it was brought to your desk?
You need to know, and I think probably you do, that already our schools have policies that allow citizens to come in and view their textbooks, view their curriculum, view their standards, and so I just see that as continuing. That's a local district concern, and if people are really interested, they need to go to their school and say, can I see your textbook? Can I see your curriculum? It's there. It's public. In this day and age, most of it is already online, so a person doesn't even have to go to the school. If it's not online, you need to go to the school and say, can I get access to these?
So what specific plans do you have to recruit and retain teachers in Nebraska?
This is, in my opinion, the number one concern that we should have, not only at the state board level, but also at the local level. There are actions right now being taken by the state board to look at certification. and what are barriers that are involved in the certification process that may prevent a child, a student from getting into the education profession. I believe the education profession is a wonderful profession. Obviously, 40 years, I better have liked it. But we need to do, at the state level, we need to do everything possible to remove any barriers that we have. Such things as competency tests. Is the test that we currently have really measuring what we can use to say this teacher has a good chance to be successful, or this teacher is not a good candidate to be a teacher? So the competency program, I think, needs to be given a hard look. Reciprocity with bordering states is a huge issue. What can we do to encourage movement across borders rather than discourage movement across borders as far as the teachers are concerned? Teacher preparation is another really big issue, and the thing that I have been very pleased with is the University of Nebraska at Kearney, the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, and Creighton University are working together with our local administrators to create ways to reduce the barriers from their end of the issue of teacher retention, teacher certification, and encouraging recruitment of the best and the brightest.
And so how would you address the issue of teacher burnout?
The thing that I notice most as I talk with teachers, as I read articles and that sort of thing, teachers want to be listened to, respected, valued, and we can legislate all day long, but unless those three things are met, that their voice is being heard, that it's being valued, that it's respected, that's where it's going to start. Obviously, I think we should do all that we can, and it was great to see that the legislature passed a bill that helps with the reduction of people who have large loans, and this will really help. Also, some signing bonus money that I think will be very, very beneficial as well. But I want to go back. Obviously, economics is huge for any of us, but in reality, a teacher wants to be respected, they want to be listened to, and they want to believe that their position is being valued.
And speaking of economics, we know that the COVID-19 pandemic put a strain on Nebraska students in terms of learning loss and, mental strains. So what specific things would you do as Board of Education to help with this?
There are currently things being done, and generally they deal with before and after school programs. Possibly identifying students who have lost some of their learning or haven't progressed as best that they could, and so before and after school programs is probably the best issue that I'm aware of to help our students regain the knowledge that they either lost or to move on and to grow at a higher rate than what they are from an intellectual standpoint. So those programs are already in place. Many of schools have already taken advantage of them, and I would just like to see a greater expansion of before and after school programs to provide kids with the opportunity to improve academically.
Now, for the after-school programs, where would you get the teachers to, be at those after-school programs? Would these be outside counselors or counselors in the schools?
Well, I don't think we should limit it, but my initial thinking was that it's going to be a paid position. It isn't going to be something, hey, come and spend an hour and a half after school in helping kids regain the learning that they've lost. So it has to be a paid position. As far as who, I would say that they should just go through a typical interview vetting process, provide a resume, and move from there. Obviously, we have experts, we call them teachers, and so I would like to see them be heavily involved in this, but I don't think that that means we should exclude those who indeed want to be teachers, who are maybe paraeducators, who are just people who really believe strongly that they want to help kids, and they should also be included in that process. So I don't want to limit or exclude anyone in this process, but I really want to focus on the fact that we've got great teachers who will be experts in their particular area. They know how to get the best out of the kids, but that doesn't mean that we can't rely on those who meet the qualifications that I've mentioned earlier.
And so what do you feel the balance should be between the State Board of Education and local school boards?
Well, obviously, I have emphasized that local control is key. And so when the state school board or the Department of Education start to overly infringe upon that local control, well, then the balance is out of whack. Now, some would say that it is out of whack. That has not really been my experience on the state board. I have found that the state board has wanted to work with school districts in partnership with local school boards, in partnerships with local administrators, and I believe that the department is working very, very hard to listen, which I think is key to maintaining a good balance, and then responding to the concerns of the local boards, the local administration, the local teachers. Are we perfect? Obviously not. We could do better, but I would just reemphasize that we are working hard to be good partners with the local school boards and the local administration and the local teachers.
And so when you look at test scores, some school districts and schools have more students that are not proficient than others. Mm-hmm. Now, if elected again, what would you do to ensure that students can meet those proficiency standards?
Just to take that into a little bit different direction, what is happening right now is the department, in conjunction with local schools, is working to develop what they call a growth model in the testing process. What we have done to this point is we have just said, okay, this is the cut score for a particular proficient or not proficient or excellent or whatever the label might be. What we are trying to do now is saying, okay, let's take the child, the student, where they are right now, and in a year's time, do we get a year's growth academically? What we have done right to this point is we have basically taken kids from where they are, but we have measured them only against where they should be. In other words, a child, and I know that we talk about homelessness, poverty, hunger, and all of those particular issues. Well, or early childhood education, which is really a big issue. If a child comes into kindergarten at a below entrance level achievement, then the thought that, oh, just by testing them or just by teaching them at that particular level that is supposedly where all kindergartners should be, what happens is we will see kids who are not performing up to snuff. They will continue to fall behind further and further and further. And so what we have to do is at early childhood education, we must try to get kids up to a level that is acceptable to enter school so that indeed then we can watch their growth year by year, taking kids where they are, not where they should be, and then trying to get them to close that gap between the high-performing student and the extremely low-performing student. If we don't close that gap early, it's going to only get worse as it goes on.
On to the second page. So, what actions do you feel need to be taken for schools and districts whose students are continually not proficient in those test standards?
We are governed there by federal legislation, and there are specific guidelines that we must follow. Right, wrong, or indifferent, those are guidelines set by the federal government, and we take federal money, and so we must follow those guidelines. So it is not as much up to us at the state level as it is us responding to the federal government saying that these are the things that are expected and that they have to be met in order for us to approve your testing methods, to approve your assessment methods, to approve your standards, or whatever the case might be. So there is that issue, and sometimes that gets lost, so it's just important that we understand that many times we are being mandated at the state level to do things that may or not, in our opinion, be as appropriate as we would want them to be.
And so, if elected again, how would you work to expand early childhood opportunities for students, particularly in rural schools?
Yeah, and I have made mention of this earlier because the research is crystal clear on this, that we must, if we're really going to make a difference in our children and their academic performance, one of the things that we have to do is expand early childhood opportunities. And this has been, when I first got on the board, this was probably my number one goal. It's now moved a little bit because I'm really concerned about the teacher shortage. But early childhood education has expanded tremendously in the last 3 years. I just want to do everything possible to keep that expansion going, to reach every child, especially the 3 and 4 year olds that need to be brought up to catch up early rather than wait till later times when it's really difficult to take a child and take care of the issues that maybe that they're dealing with, not the least of which is poverty, and then trying to try to catch them up on the run, so to speak. We've got to get them started all. Try to do the best that we can to get kids up to snuff in the really early years, kindergarten, preschool. And if we do that, our chances of being academically more successful have increased dramatically.
And how would you continue to ensure all Nebraska students are college and career ready, once they graduate from high school?
One of the issues that we have, one of the goals that the department has and the state board has, is to ensure that every child is not only college and career ready, but also civic ready. And what we've seen then are either legislation or actions by the NDE or the state board, or at the local level to expand career opportunities in family and consumer science, our industrial tech classes, and the list could go on and on. And I'm always just so impressed with our organizations that deal with career readiness, FFA, FCCLA, FBLA, and the like. Those are great programs that we have in our schools. Obviously, it would be great if all of those could be expanded into every school, but that again is more of a local decision as compared to the state board saying we have to have this, we have to have that. Now, what the state board has done in conjunction with the Department of Education, in conjunction with local boards, we have actually set standards, and I know that's kind of a dirty word right now, but we have worked with the local level, the teachers, in setting standards for career education. And I think that is something that has been very, very beneficial to the schools within at least the 7th District. As I travel across the 7th District, I am always amazed at the abilities that these kids have, not only in career education, but our fine arts people are just absolutely awesome with their abilities, and I'm just amazed at just their talent level. I'm just saying, oh, I don't even want to be around them because they're so good. It makes me feel so inferior. But in reality, no, I'm thrilled to be around them. But those are all programs that are very, very valuable, very important. And I hope that we never lose sight of, like you say, college, not only college, but career, not only career, but also civic ready. And I believe that there's been some really good steps that have been taken, and I just want to see those expanded and continued to improve and get our kids out there and get them ready.
And so what would you like to see the State Board of Education expand dual credit course opportunities?
Oh, fantastic question. Dual credit is being expanded throughout at least the 7th district, and I believe that it's across the state, but I feel uncomfortable in sharing something about might be happening in the 1st district because I don't know. I know what's happening in the 7th district. So yeah, it's just I've kind of lost my train of thought. The topic is, again,
yes, dual credit
dual
course.
credit. Okay, let's kind of start over on that.
Yeah.
But dual credit is being expanded throughout the 7th district. I'm just so excited when I see our community colleges get involved in the school districts across this district, and it just warms my heart when I hear of a child who has, hey, I've got my first semester of college already done because I took dual credit courses in our high school. And so that partnership is just wonderful, and it needs to be expanded. Community colleges have done a fantastic job with that. Our 4-year colleges are also working hard at that. And then, of course, our local schools are working extremely hard for the dual credit courses.
And so if elected again, how would you work to create workforce partnerships for kids who may not want to attend college?
Well, when you talk about workforce development, if I could go back to early childhood education, one of the things that will really help the workforce is an expanded early childhood opportunity program. And you say, well, how is that? Well, number one, it starts with allowing parents now to get more involved in the workforce because they have a good, proven program that says your kids are going to be taken care of, and they're going to be taken care of very, very well for the hours that you have to spend at your job. You do that, and your workforce really improves. And also there is some real research that we're finding out that the more we can get kids up to snuff academically at those early age, that their chances of being very productive in the workforce is immeasurably increased. So I think it always starts with that early childhood program, and that's why I'm such an advocate for early childhood. Again, the research is so crystal clear on this, it just can't be ignored, and I want to emphasize that it hasn't been ignored because our local boards have done a great job of trying to increase their early childhood programs.
And so what would you do to encourage Nebraska high school students to return to their hometowns to work and raise a family, specifically in rural Nebraska?
It's an issue across the state, in particular in my district, the 7th district, which is the western half of the state. And it goes back to our earlier conversations about economic development. What we have to do is we have to provide kids an opportunity to come back to their particular area. I can use the district that I live in as an example. They continually bring in economic development programs, businesses, and so on and so forth that encourage kids to come back to their community because there are jobs available, there's an excellent school available, there's an excellent health program available, and you put those three things together and you can bring kids back to your community. I see it every day in the community that I live in, and I just cannot emphasize enough the importance, again, of economic development in order to bring kids back. And the economic development focuses on not only businesses, but education and medical assistance.
Perfect. And my last question is what's the message that you want to send to people if they question why should they vote for you again?
Sure. My past 3 years, I believe that I have been a great listener. I have listened to their concerns. I have responded in kind. And I just think that that skill of listening to make good, sound decisions for the constituents of my district just cannot be overstated. My experience, not only on the state board, but 40 years as a teacher, as a coach, as an administrator, eventually a superintendent for 13 years, has provided me the opportunity to make the calls, make the decisions that need to be made. And why do I make a decision? Because I care about kids. I want what is best for kids.